My name is Camilla, and at 30 years old, I thought my engagement party would be the happiest night of my life. The champagne flowed. Thomas looked at me with pure love, and our guests mingled in perfect harmony. Then my grandpa Warren approached, glass raised for a toast. So, Camilla loving the beach mansion I gave you in the Hamptons. I froze, completely confused. Beach mansion. What beach mansion? When I looked at my parents, their faces went white as sheets. Before I tell you how my perfect engagement night turned into a family nightmare, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join me through this journey of betrayal and redemption. Before that fateful night, my life seemed picture perfect. I had a gorgeous apartment in Manhattan's Upper East Side, a thriving career as an interior designer for New York's elite, and a handsome, successful fiancé who seemed too good to be true. Thomas and I met at a charity gala where his investment firm was the main sponsor. He approached me at the bar not with some cheesy pickup line, but with a genuine question about my opinion on the venue's design. That simple conversation bloomed into a whirlwind romance that had us moving in together after just 6 months. When he proposed on our 18th month anniversary with a vintage emerald ring that had belonged to his great-grandmother, I couldn't say yes fast enough. My parents, Linda and Richard, had always been somewhat of an enigma to me. They maintained an impressive lifestyle in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights and took lavish vacations twice a year, despite their modest careers as a high school principal and a hospital administrator. I had questioned the math behind their spending habits a few times over the years, but they always had explanations ready about wise investments and family money. "We just know how to make our money work for us, honey," my mother would say with a dismissive wave of her hand whenever I brought it up. There was always something slightly off about their explanations, a tiny thread of inconsistency that nagged at me, but I never pulled hard enough to unravel it. After all, they were my parents. Why would I doubt them? Grandpa Warren was different altogether. A self-made real estate developer who built his fortune from nothing, he had always been somewhat of a mythical figure in my life. He told colorful stories about starting with a single rundown property in Queens and building an empire that eventually spanned multiple states. When I was little, his visits meant extravagant gifts and exciting adventures. He taught me to ride a bike, took me to my first Broadway show, and told me I could achieve anything I set my mind to. But after my grandmother passed away when I was 15, something changed. Grandpa Warren started traveling extensively, eventually settling in the south of France. Our communications became sporadic birthday calls and occasional emails. I missed him terribly, but assumed this was his way of coping with grief. When we sent him an invitation to the engagement party, I honestly didn't expect him to come. It had been nearly a decade since he'd attended a family gathering. I was overjoyed when he RSVP'd yes, but my parents' reaction was strangely muted. "That's nice, dear," my mother said when I called to tell her the news. "We'll make sure everything is perfect for him." There was an undercurrent of tension in her voice that I dismissed as anxiety about hosting my grandfather, who could be particular about details. The weeks leading up to the engagement party were a flurry of planning. We'd booked the rooftop of an exclusive downtown hotel with views of the Brooklyn Bridge and Manhattan skyline. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for Thomas and me, but also because I was secretly hoping to reconnect with Grandpa Warren. My parents insisted on handling most of the arrangements, which seemed generous at the time. Now I realized they were controlling the situation, making sure certain details were managed their way. They were particularly adamant about the seating arrangements, placing Grandpa Warren at a table far from their own. I thought they were just being thoughtful, since he didn't know many people, giving him interesting dinner companions instead of boring family. The night of the party arrived and everything looked magical. Soft string lights crisscrossed above the rooftop, crystal glasses sparkled on tables adorned with arrangements of white peonies and blue hydrangeas, and the sunset painted the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink. When Thomas took my hand and whispered, "We did it," I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Grandpa Warren arrived looking distinguished in a perfectly tailored navy suit. Age had barely touched him aside from his now completely silver hair. He still stood tall and moved with purpose. When he hugged me, the familiar scent of his sandalwood cologne brought back a flood of childhood memories. "My Camilla," he said, holding me at arm's length to look at me. You are the image of your grandmother. She would have been so proud. I noticed my mother hovering nearby, an anxious smile plastered on her face. She quickly stepped in to guide Grandpa to the bar, saying something about getting him his favorite scotch. Throughout the cocktail hour, I observed my parents taking turns keeping Grandpa engaged with other guests, almost as if they were running interference. Again, I thought they were just being attentive hosts. The evening progressed beautifully. Thomas's speech about our future together made me tear up. And when I looked around at our friends and family, I felt surrounded by love and support. The food was exquisite, the music perfect, and even the weather cooperated with a gentle breeze that kept everyone comfortable. It wasn't until after dinner during the dancing portion of the evening that Grandpa Warren finally managed to get me alone. He approached with two champagne flutes, handed me one, and made the comment that would change everything. So, Camilla, loving the beach mansion I gave you in the Hamptons I drove by last weekend when I first got back from Europe. Looks like you've done some renovations to the garden. Always thought that infinity pool needed some landscaping around it. And just like that, my perfect world began to crack. The silence that followed Grandpa's question about the beach mansion felt eternal. My champagne glass froze halfway to my lips as confusion swept through me. Behind Grandpa, I saw my father's casual stroll toward us suddenly accelerate, his eyes widening with panic. "What beach mansion, Grandpa?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandpa Warren's bushy eyebrows drew together. "The Southampton property, of course. The one I gifted you for your 25th birthday." His tone was casual, as though remarking on something as ordinary as the weather. 3 acres private beach access, the one with that beautiful sunroom you always loved when we visited the neighbors there during your teen years. My father arrived at that moment, clapping a hand on Grandpa's shoulder with forced joviality. "Warren, there you are. Some old friends from the golf club are dying to say hello." He tried to steer Grandpa away, but my grandfather stood firm. "Richard, what is this? Camilla seems confused about the beach house." Grandpa's voice had dropped an octave, taking on the authoritative tone I remembered from my childhood. My mother materialized as if summoned by some silent alarm, her smile tight and eyes darting between us. "Is everything okay here?" Her fingers twisted the pearl necklace she wore, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. "Apparently not," Grandpa replied, looking between my parents with growing suspicion. "Camilla doesn't seem to know about the Southampton property." Thomas joined our increasingly uncomfortable circle, placing a supportive hand on my lower back. "What's happening?" he whispered. "I have no idea," I whispered back. "Something about a beach house I supposedly own." Grandpa Warren's face had transformed from confusion to dawning comprehension, then to something harder. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," he suggested, though his tone made it clear this wasn't optional. My father glanced around at the party guests, many of whom were now looking our way with curious expressions. "Warren, this is Camilla's engagement party. Surely this can wait until tomorrow." "No, Richard, I don't believe it can." Grandpa's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. We moved to a small private lounge adjacent to the rooftop. Thomas came with us, his presence a comforting anchor, as my family dynamic unraveled before my eyes. Once the door closed behind us, Grandpa turned to face my parents. "5 years ago, I transferred ownership of my Southampton beach property to Camilla as a 25th birthday gift, a property worth approximately $3.8 million. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, scrolled briefly, and then held it out to show a digital copy of a document. "I have the transfer paperwork right here, including Camilla's signature accepting the gift." I stepped forward to look at the phone screen. There at the bottom of the legal document was indeed a signature that resembled mine, but I had never seen this document before, let alone signed it. "That's not my signature," I said, the words falling from my lips before I could fully process what this meant. "I mean, it looks like mine, but I didn't sign this. And I definitely never received a beach house." My mother let out a small strangled sound. My father's face had gone from white to red, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's cool air conditioning. "There must be some mistake," my father said, his lawyer voice taking over, smooth and reasonable. "Perhaps the property transfer wasn't completed correctly. Real estate transactions can be complicated." Grandpa Warren's eyes narrowed. The transfer was handled by my personal attorney of 30 years. There was no mistake. He turned to look directly at me. Camilla, you never received this property. You never knew about it. I shook my head, feeling as though I was watching this scene unfold from outside my body. No, Grandpa. This is the first I'm hearing about any beach house. Thomas spoke up, his confusion evident. Sir, I can confirm Camilla has never mentioned owning property in the Hamptons. We've actually been looking at weekend homes there recently, which wouldn't make sense if she already owned one. Grandpa turned his attention back to my parents, his expression hardening. Richard, Linda, explain yourselves. My father loosened his tie, buying time. Warren, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Why don't we discuss this tomorrow when we're all clear-headed? Tonight is about celebrating Camilla and Thomas. A misunderstanding. Grandpa's voice was dangerously quiet. The property was transferred. The deed was changed. The taxes have been paid. Someone has been living in or using that house for 5 years, and if it wasn't Camilla, then who was it? My mother cracked first. We were going to tell her. She blurted out, tears forming in her eyes. We just needed some time to sort things out. Tell me what, I demanded, stepping away from Thomas to face my mother directly. What have you done? The door opened, and the event coordinator peeked in. Excuse me, but your guests are asking about the cake cutting scheduled for now. Thomas handled it smoothly. Please tell everyone we'll be out in 10 minutes. Family discussion. After she left the room, fell silent again. My father sighed deeply, seeming to deflate before our eyes. We sold the property, he admitted finally. We had some financial difficulties. It was temporary. We were going to buy it back or get Camilla something equivalent. The room spun around me. You sold a house that was given to me. How is that even possible? I never signed anything. My father couldn't meet my eyes. My mother was openly crying now, mascara trailing down her cheeks. How long have you been doing this? Grandpa Warren asked, and something in his tone suggested he already suspected this wasn't an isolated incident. Neither of my parents answered. Outside, through the glass walls of our private room, I could see our guests dancing, laughing, completely unaware of the bomb that had just detonated in my family. The contrast between their joy and my growing horror felt surreal. Thomas put his arm around my shoulders, steadying me. I think we need to return to the party, he said quietly. We can continue this discussion after the guests leave. Somehow, I made it through the cake cutting, smiling mechanically, as Thomas and I fed each other small bites for the photographer. I moved through the next hour on autopilot, accepting congratulations and well wishes, dancing with Thomas's father, hugging college friends, all while my mind raced with questions I was afraid to answer. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Grandpa Warren pulled me aside. We will get to the bottom of this, he promised, his weathered hand squeezing mine. I'm staying in town for 2 weeks. This is not your burden to carry alone. When the last guest finally departed, it was nearly 2 a.m. Thomas, Grandpa Warren, my parents, and I gathered once more in the now empty rooftop venue. The beautiful lights that had seemed so magical hours earlier now cast harsh shadows across my parents' guilty faces. The time had come for the full truth, and I was terrified of what I was about to learn. The cleaning crew worked quietly around us, breaking down tables and collecting discarded champagne flutes. We moved to a corner where several lounge chairs remained, creating an impromptu family meeting space. The Manhattan skyline glittered behind us, indifferent to the drama unfolding in its shadow. Start from the beginning, I said to my parents, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside me. And don't leave anything out. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a crumpled cocktail napkin. My father stared down at his hands, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Neither seemed eager to speak first. The property sold for $4.2 million, Grandpa Warren said, breaking the silence, above market value at the time. So where did that money go if not to Camilla? My father finally looked up. We had debts, significant ones. What kind of debts could possibly justify stealing millions from your own daughter? Thomas asked, his voice tightly controlled but edged with anger. My mother flinched at the word stealing, but she didn't deny it. It started small, she whispered. Just a few thousand here and there from investment accounts Warren had set up for Camilla when she was born. I felt like I'd been slapped. You've been taking my money since I was a child. We always intended to pay it back, my father insisted. But then there were some bad investments, and we needed to cover those losses. Then the housing market crashed in 2008, and we were underwater on some properties we'd bought as rental investments. So you gambled with my money and lost? I was struggling to comprehend the scale of their betrayal. Not exactly gambling, my father said defensively. Real estate investments. That's exactly what it was. My mother contradicted him, her voice suddenly stronger. Be honest for once, Richard. We've been living beyond our means for decades, making risky investments, trying to keep up with a lifestyle we couldn't afford. And yes, actual gambling too. My father shot her a look of betrayal, but she continued. I can't do this anymore. The lies, the hiding, the constant fear of being caught. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. Your father has a gambling problem, Camilla. He has for years. Atlantic City online poker sports betting. It started as a hobby but spiraled out of control. And you enabled him? Grandpa Warren said, his voice hard as granite. Yes, she admitted, her shoulders sagging. I enabled him. I helped hide it. I convinced myself we were borrowing, not stealing. What else? I asked, a horrible suspicion growing that the beach house wasn't the only thing they had taken from me. My parents exchanged a glance, and in that look I saw the truth before they spoke it. Your college fund, my father admitted. The one Warren set up for you. We used most of it when you were in high school. That's why we pushed so hard for you to apply for scholarships. I remembered the long nights filling out endless scholarship applications, the summer jobs, the student loans I was still paying off, all while a fund existed that should have covered everything. The car Warren gave you for your 16th birthday, my mother added. We sold it and bought the cheaper one we gave you instead. The trust fund he established when you graduated college, my father continued, the confessions now pouring out. We forged your signature on that too. Each revelation felt like another blow. I thought of all the years I'd worked multiple jobs, pinched pennies, lived with roommates in tiny apartments, all while my parents were secretly stealing my inheritance. How much? I asked, my voice barely audible. In total, how much have you taken from me? My father hesitated, then named a figure that made me physically recoil. Nearly $7 million over my lifetime. Money that could have changed everything about my adult years. Thomas, who had been silently supportive beside me, finally spoke. This is criminal fraud, identity theft, forgery. His background in finance made him particularly aware of the legal implications. These aren't just moral failings, these are felonies. We're your parents, my father said, as if that excused everything. Parents are supposed to protect their children, not steal from them, Grandpa Warren replied, his voice shaking with fury. I trusted you with her future, with the legacy I worked my entire life to build. How dare you betray that trust? My mother was sobbing now. We never meant for it to go this far. But it did, I said, feeling strangely calm as shock gave way to clarity. It went this far because you made thousands of individual choices to keep stealing, keep lying, keep betraying me. This wasn't one mistake. This was a lifetime of calculated deception. The weight of it all suddenly hit me. My parents, the people who were supposed to love and protect me above all others, had been systematically robbing me my entire life. They had watched me struggle financially, stress over student loans, work myself to exhaustion, building my career from scratch, all while sitting on millions that should have been mine. Grandpa Warren looked utterly heartbroken. My own daughter, he said to my mother. How could you do this? Not just to Camilla, but to me. I worked so hard to make sure my granddaughter would be taken care of, that she would have opportunities I never had. My father tried once more to defend himself. We had a lifestyle to maintain, appearances to keep up. You don't understand the pressure. Don't you dare, I interrupted, anger finally breaking through the shock. Don't you dare try to justify this. You stole my future to fund your lifestyle. You watched me work 3 jobs during college while you were living off my trust fund. I turned to Thomas, suddenly wondering how this would affect us. His family was wealthy and respected. Would they still want him to marry into this mess? Would he? As if reading my thoughts, Thomas took my hand firmly in his. We'll figure this out, he said quietly. This changes nothing about how I feel about you. The party decorations that had seemed so beautiful hours ago now looked gaudy and excessive in the harsh reality of dawn breaking over the city. The engagement celebration that was meant to mark the beginning of my new life had instead revealed that my old life had been built on lies. "I need time to process this," I said, standing up on shaky legs. "I can't even look at you right now," I added, addressing my parents. "Camilla, please," my mother begged. "We're still your parents. We still love you." "Love doesn't steal," I replied simply. "Love doesn't lie. I don't know what you feel for me, but it isn't love as I understand it." I left the rooftop with Thomas and Grandpa Warren, leaving my parents behind with the remnants of a celebration that now felt like a funeral for the family I thought I had. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces, heard their justifications, and felt the crushing weight of their betrayal all over again. Thomas stayed with me in our apartment, holding me when I cried and giving me space when I needed it. But even his unwavering support couldn't ease the fundamental brokenness I felt inside. When morning came, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling. I reached for my phone and began researching everything I could about financial fraud and identity theft within families. What I found was both illuminating and devastating. Parental financial abuse was more common than I had realized, though the scale of what my parents had done went far beyond most cases. Thomas brought me coffee and sat beside me on the bed. "What do you want to do?" he asked simply. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to press charges, make them face consequences. Another part can't imagine being responsible for sending my own parents to jail. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," he assured me. My phone rang. It was Grandpa Warren calling to check on me and to let me know he had contacted his lawyer. "We need to understand the full extent of what they've done," he explained. "Not just for closure, but for practical reasons. There could be ongoing fraud, tax implications, property issues." He was right, of course. This wasn't just an emotional family crisis. It was potentially a legal nightmare that could have far-reaching consequences for all of us. Later that afternoon, Thomas and I went to my parents' brownstone. I needed answers to questions that had kept me awake all night. Thomas insisted on coming with me, concerned about how the confrontation might go. My mother opened the door looking haggard, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. My father sat in the living room unshaven and still wearing clothes from the night before. The house I had grown up in suddenly felt alien to me, as though I was seeing it through new eyes. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said without preamble. "Please sit down," my mother offered, gesturing to the sofa. I remained standing. "I've been doing research. What you've done constitutes criminal fraud, forgery, identity theft, and financial elder abuse against Grandpa. You could both go to prison for years." My father blanched, but tried to recover with forced reasonableness. "Camilla, we're your parents. Surely you don't want to see us in prison. We can work this out as a family." "As a family," I repeated incredulously. "You destroyed our family. You've been stealing from me since I was a child. You forged my signature, sold property in my name, and pocketed millions meant for my future. And you did it all while watching me struggle." My mother began to cry again. "We made terrible mistakes. We got caught in a cycle we couldn't escape. Your father's gambling addiction, our debts. It all spiraled out of control." "An addiction doesn't justify what you did," Thomas said quietly. "It might explain it, but it doesn't excuse it." My father's face hardened. "You don't get to judge us, young man. This is between us and our daughter." "No," I said firmly. "Thomas is going to be my husband. He's family now. The family I choose, not the family that betrayed me." I moved around the living room, looking at the expensive art on the walls, the designer furniture, all the trappings of wealth that I now realized had been purchased with stolen money. My stolen money. "Was anything real?" I asked suddenly. "All those times you told me how proud you were that I was making it on my own, building my business from scratch. Did you ever feel guilty knowing you were the reason I had to struggle so hard in the first place?" My mother looked down at her hands. "Of course we felt guilty. But by then we were in so deep there seemed to be no way out." "There was a way out," I countered. "You could have confessed, gotten help, made amends. Instead, you kept taking more. As we talked, more painful revelations emerged. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance from Grandpa Warren. There had been other relatives who left me money when they passed away, smaller amounts that disappeared before I ever knew they existed. Great Aunt Martha's antique jewelry collection that was supposed to come to me. Cousin James's rare book collection. All sold, all converted to cash that fueled my parents' unsustainable lifestyle and my father's gambling habit. The most painful discovery came when I asked about a specific childhood memory. What about Grandma Rose's music box, the one she promised would be mine when she died? You told me it was lost in the move. My mother's face crumpled. We sold it to an antique dealer in Boston. That beautiful hand-carved music box that played Claire de Lune, the one my grandmother had shown me as a child, telling me stories about how it had come with her family from Europe. One of the few tangible connections to my heritage sold without a second thought. Something broke inside me then. It wasn't just the money they had stolen, which was bad enough. They had stolen my history, my connections to family who loved me, tangible pieces of my heritage that could never be replaced. I'm done, I said, standing up abruptly. I can't do this anymore today. Camilla, please, my father said, reaching for my arm. We need to figure this out. What are you going to tell people? Even now, he was worried about appearances, about what people would think. I'm going to tell them the truth, I replied, pulling my arm away. That my parents had been stealing from me my entire life, that everything they appear to have is built on fraud and lies. You can't, my mother gasped. You'll destroy us. You destroyed yourselves, I said coldly, and you nearly destroyed me in the process. I won't protect you from the consequences of your actions anymore. As Thomas and I left, my father called after us. We can still fix this. We can find a way to pay you back. I turned back one last time. It's not about the money. It's about the trust, and that can never be repaid. Walking away from my childhood home, I felt a strange mix of devastation and liberation. Something fundamental had broken. But in that breaking, I also felt the first stirrings of a new strength. For the first time in my life, I was seeing my parents clearly. And for the first time, I was putting myself first. The week following my engagement party unraveled like a nightmare in slow motion. What should have been a time of joy and wedding planning became a maelstrom of legal consultations, painful conversations, and shattered illusions. Thomas suggested we put our engagement on hold temporarily. Not because he wanted to break up, he assured me, but because we needed space to deal with the crisis before moving forward with wedding plans. I love you, he said, holding my hands tightly in his. That hasn't changed and won't change, but I think we both need time to process what's happened before we jump into planning a wedding. I knew he was right, but it still felt like one more loss in a week filled with them. We agreed to postpone setting a date, but kept our engagement intact. Thomas moved some of his things to his brother's apartment, giving me space in our home to process my grief privately when I needed to. Grandpa Warren's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Judith Levine, helped us begin the painstaking process of documenting everything my parents had stolen. She advised me to file a police report, which was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Sitting in a police station formally accusing my own parents of theft and fraud felt surreal and devastating. Family financial abuse cases are particularly complex, Judith explained during one of our meetings. The courts often struggle with them because of the familial relationships involved. But what your parents did goes well beyond borrowing without permission. The systematic nature, the forgery, the sheer scale of it makes this a clear criminal case. The scandal broke within our social circle almost immediately. A few guests from the engagement party had noticed the tension during the final hours, and rumors spread quickly. I received a flood of messages from friends and acquaintances ranging from supportive to morbidly curious. Some suggested I should forgive my parents because family is family. Others offered genuine support and understanding. My professional life took a hit as well. Several clients quietly withdrew from projects uncomfortable with the negative attention. The design world could be extremely image-conscious, and some clients didn't want to be associated with a family scandal, no matter how blameless I was in it. I moved temporarily into a hotel needing neutral space away from the apartment Thomas and I shared. I couldn't bear to see the engagement gifts still piled in our living room, tangible reminders of a celebration that had turned to ash. Grandpa Warren also moved out of his hotel and into a furnished rental apartment, announcing his intention to stay in New York indefinitely until everything was resolved. I failed you once by trusting your parents to honor my intentions, he told me over dinner at a quiet restaurant. I won't fail you again. Having him back in my life was the one bright spot in the darkness. We spent long hours talking, rebuilding our relationship, and sharing memories of my grandmother. He told me stories about my mother as a young woman, before she met my father, trying to understand where things had gone wrong. Your mother was always ambitious, he reflected. She wanted the finest things, the best schools, the right neighborhood. There's nothing wrong with ambition itself, but somewhere along the way, she and your father began to value appearances over substance. And that's a slippery slope. My parents tried repeatedly to contact me, sending texts, emails, and even having flowers delivered to my office. I maintained minimal communication, only engaging through Judith when necessary for legal matters. Each message from them contained some mixture of justification, excuse, and plea for forgiveness that only made me more certain of my decision to keep my distance. About a week after the engagement party, Thomas's parents requested a dinner with us. I was terrified they were going to pressure him to end our relationship entirely, and I wouldn't have blamed them. Who would want their son marrying into such a mess? We met at their Upper West Side apartment, an elegant but understated home that reflected their old money values of quality over showiness. To my surprise, they were remarkably understanding. "What your parents did is unconscionable," Thomas's mother said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "But it says nothing about you, Camilla. If anything, the grace with which you're handling this crisis tells us exactly the kind of person you are." Thomas's father nodded in agreement. "We raised our son to recognize character and integrity. He clearly found those qualities in you, and recent events have only confirmed his judgment." Their acceptance brought me to tears. In the midst of losing my birth family, I was being embraced by the family I was choosing to join. The legal process ground forward, with Judith uncovering more evidence of my parents' deception with each passing day. Bank records showed systematic siphoning of funds from accounts in my name. Property records revealed the beach house had been sold to a wealthy hedge fund manager who had no idea of the fraudulent nature of the sale. Then came another bombshell. While going through old correspondence of Grandpa Warren's, we discovered letters he had written to me over the years that I'd never received. Letters containing advice, family stories, and expressions of love and pride that had been intercepted by my parents. Reading them for the first time was both beautiful and heartbreaking, connecting me to years of love I hadn't known existed, while simultaneously highlighting how much had been stolen from me beyond money. "They kept these from me too," I said, holding the bundle of letters with trembling hands. It wasn't enough to take the material things. They had to take this connection as well. The discovery of the letters was a turning point for me. The financial theft was devastating, but this emotional theft struck even deeper. They had actively prevented me from having a relationship with my grandfather out of fear that he would discover their fraud. They had deprived both of us of years we could have shared together. That night alone in my hotel room, I made two important decisions. First, I would pursue full legal justice, regardless of the consequences for my parents. And second, I would rebuild my interior design business on my own terms, with a new perspective on what really mattered in life. The next morning, I called Thomas and asked him to meet me at our apartment. When he arrived, I took both his hands in mine and looked directly into his eyes. "I want to move forward," I told him. "Not with wedding planning yet, but with us, with our life together. I don't want to put anything on hold anymore. This situation with my parents is going to take months, maybe years to fully resolve, but I don't want it to steal any more time from us than it already has." Thomas pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "That's all I wanted to hear," he whispered against my hair. "We'll face this together, one day at a time." For the first time since my engagement party, I felt a glimmer of hope breaking through the darkness. My life had been built on a foundation of lies, but from those ruins, I could build something new, something authentic, something that was truly mine. As the initial shock began to fade, I found myself entering a new phase of this unwanted journey, the fight to reclaim my life. The police investigation into my parents' activities was moving forward, and the district attorney was reviewing the case for potential charges. Meanwhile, civil proceedings had begun to recover what assets could be traced and returned. My parents had hired a high-profile attorney who specialized in white-collar crime. Their first move was to approach us through their lawyer with a plea bargain offer they would sign over their brownstone and remaining assets to me if I would agree not to pursue criminal charges. It's actually not a bad offer financially, Judith admitted when we discussed it. The brownstone alone is worth close to $3 million in today's market. But it's entirely your decision whether you want to accept it. There are considerations beyond money here. I thought about it overnight, but woke up with absolute clarity. No deal, I told Judith the next morning. This isn't just about recovering money. It's about justice and consequences. They need to face what they've done, not buy their way out of it. Grandpa Warren supported my decision completely. You can't put a price on integrity, he said when I told him. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. Meanwhile, Thomas had been my rock throughout the entire ordeal. Where some men might have been scared off by such family complications, he seemed to grow even more committed. I'm seeing your strength in action, he told me one evening as we walked along the Hudson River. The way you're handling this with dignity and courage only makes me more certain you're the woman I want to spend my life with. His parents had been surprisingly supportive as well. Thomas's mother called regularly to check on me, and his father, an attorney himself, offered valuable insights into the legal process. Their support meant everything, especially as my relationship with my own parents had disintegrated completely. After declining their plea bargain offer, my parents changed tactics. They began telling family members and mutual friends that I was being vindictive and ungrateful. After everything we did for her, raising her, loving her, this is how she repays us. My mother reportedly told my second cousin at a family gathering I didn't attend. Their attempts to manipulate the narrative only strengthened my resolve. I decided it was time to take back control of my own story. I met with the few clients who had remained loyal despite the scandal and was transparent about what had happened. Rather than driving them away, my honesty seemed to solidify their trust in me. You've always had an eye for authentic beauty in your designs, one longtime client told me. Now I see that authenticity runs deeper than aesthetics for you. Inspired by this response, I began rebuilding my interior design business with a new philosophy. Instead of chasing high-profile clients and magazine features, I focused on creating spaces that reflected genuine personal values. I became more selective about projects, choosing to work with clients who appreciated thoughtful, meaningful design over flashy status symbols. My meeting with Grandpa Warren took an unexpected turn when he revealed something I hadn't known. I've been financially supporting your parents for decades, he admitted, looking ashamed. Beyond the gifts I intended for you, I've been giving them regular infusions of cash whenever they claimed to be in a tight spot. You didn't know they were gambling it away, I said, trying to absolve him of guilt. I suspected something wasn't right, he replied. The amounts they needed kept increasing and their explanations became increasingly vague. But they were my daughter and son-in-law. I wanted to believe them. He sighed heavily. I should have looked closer, asked tougher questions. Maybe all of this could have been prevented. We can't change the past, I told him, echoing words of wisdom he'd once shared with me as a child. We can only shape the future. He smiled at having his own advice quoted back to him. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, I replied, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. The discovery of old letters that had been hidden from me continued to yield unexpected emotional treasures. Among them was a series of notes from Grandpa Warren when I was in college, expressing how proud he was of my independence and determination. Reading them now, knowing I'd been forced into that independence by my parents' theft rather than genuine financial necessity, was bittersweet. But the letters also helped me connect with a part of my heritage and family history I'd been denied. Grandpa shared stories about my grandmother, about their early struggles building the real estate business, about their values and dreams. Through his words, I discovered a legacy of true grit and integrity that had been obscured by my parents' materialism and deception. One afternoon, I found myself going through old photo albums with Thomas. There was a picture of me at about 7 years old sitting on Grandpa Warren's lap while he read me a story. The look of adoration on my face was mirrored in his. That connection was real, Thomas observed. They couldn't steal that even though they tried. His insight struck me profoundly. My parents had taken material gifts, intercepted letters, and even sold family heirlooms, but they couldn't erase the fundamental bond between my grandfather and me. That realization was strangely empowering. I also began therapy, recognizing that professional help was necessary to process the complex emotions I was experiencing. My therapist helped me understand that what I was going through was a form of grief, not unlike losing a loved one. "You're mourning the parents you thought you had," she explained. "You're grieving the family narrative you believed in. That's a profound loss, and it's okay to feel it deeply." With her guidance, I began to untangle the complex web of emotions: betrayal, anger, sadness, guilt, and even occasional moments of inappropriate responsibility for my parents' situation. She helped me see that holding them accountable wasn't cruel or vindictive. It was healthy and necessary. As criminal proceedings against my parents gained momentum, Thomas and I decided to officially resume our engagement. We didn't announce it widely, but we began making plans for a very different wedding than we had originally envisioned. "I don't want the big society wedding anymore," I told Thomas one evening. "It feels wrong now knowing how much of my parents' lifestyle was built on lies and theft." "What do you want?" he asked simply. "Something small, authentic, with the people who've stood by us through this mess. Maybe at Grandpa Warren's place once he finds a permanent home here in New York." Thomas smiled. "That sounds perfect to me." The turning point in my journey came unexpectedly during a pretrial hearing for my parents' case. Sitting in the courtroom watching them at the defendant's table, I was struck by how small they looked. My larger-than-life parents, who had always dominated my world with their personalities and expectations, now seemed diminished. Their expensive clothes and carefully maintained appearances, unable to disguise their essential weakness. For the first time, I saw them clearly not as parental authorities, but as deeply flawed individuals who had made terrible choices. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. They no longer had power over me emotionally or otherwise. I was standing on my own, supported by authentic relationships with Thomas Grandpa Warren, and friends who valued me for myself, not for appearances or material success. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt lighter somehow. The legal process would continue, justice would be served, but I no longer needed to carry the weight of their betrayal. I could build my own life on a foundation of truth, even if that meant starting over in many ways. "I'm ready to move forward," I told Thomas that night. Really move forward, not just say the words. He understood what I meant without needing explanation. "Then let's do it together," he replied, taking my hand and leading me toward our future one step at a time. 6 months after my engagement party, I stood in the back of a Manhattan courtroom watching as the judge delivered sentences to my parents. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case documenting decades of systematic fraud that extended far beyond what we had initially discovered. In the end, my parents accepted a plea deal that included full financial restitution, 5 years of probation, mandatory counseling for gambling addiction, and community service. Their sentences could have been much harsher, potentially including prison time, but I had ultimately agreed to the prosecutor's recommendation for probation rather than incarceration. Not out of forgiveness, but from a pragmatic understanding that their serving jail time wouldn't restore what I had lost. When invited to make a victim impact statement to the court, I spoke from the heart. "What my parents stole from me can't be measured solely in dollars," I said, standing at the podium, my voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. "They stole my trust in the people who should have been most trustworthy. They stole my connection to my grandfather and other family members. They stole my sense of security and my belief in a just world where parents protect their children rather than exploit them." I paused, looking directly at my parents for the first time since entering the courtroom. But they also inadvertently gave me something valuable: the opportunity to rebuild my life on a foundation of truth, to discover my own strength, to learn the difference between genuine love and toxic attachment disguised as love. I'm not glad this happened, but I am determined to emerge from it stronger and wiser. The judge nodded thoughtfully before turning to my parents. The betrayal of a child's trust by their parents represents a particularly egregious breach of both legal and moral boundaries, she stated firmly. Your daughter has shown remarkable grace in supporting a sentence that keeps you out of prison. I strongly suggest you spend your probation not only making financial amends, but also doing the difficult internal work necessary to understand the depth of the harm you've caused. After the sentencing, Grandpa Warren put his arm around my shoulders as we left the courthouse. You did well in there, he said. Not many could have spoken with such dignity. I learned from the best, I replied, leaning into his embrace. The past 6 months had been transformative in many ways. Grandpa Warren had permanently relocated to New York, purchasing a beautiful townhouse in Greenwich Village, where he invited me to visit whenever I wished. He had also established a proper trust for me with ironclad legal protections that my parents could never access. I should have done this decades ago, he told me when the trust documents were finalized, but I naively believed your parents would honor my intentions. We both trusted them, I reminded him. That wasn't our failure, it was theirs. Thomas and I had decided to move forward with our wedding, but in a way that reflected our new understanding of what truly mattered. Instead of the lavish event we had originally planned, we opted for an intimate ceremony in the garden of Grandpa Warren's new home, with only 30 guests, all people who had stood by us during the darkest moments of the past months. My wedding dress was simple but elegant, purchased with my own honestly earned money, rather than the illusory wealth my parents had projected. Thomas wore his grandfather's restored vintage tuxedo, a nod to authentic family legacy. When Grandpa Warren walked me down the aisle, I felt a circle completing a wrong being righted. My parents were not invited to the wedding. Though I had begun cautiously communicating with them again, our relationship remained fundamentally altered. They were attending therapy both individually and as a couple, working to address the underlying issues that had led to their deceptions. My father's gambling addiction was finally being treated seriously, and my mother was confronting her role as an enabler. Recovery is a long road, my mother told me during one of our carefully structured meetings supervised by my therapist. We know we can never undo what we did. We can only try to be better going forward. I appreciate that you're getting help, I responded, maintaining the emotional boundaries I had worked hard to establish. But trust once broken so completely can't be repaired quickly or easily. It may never be fully restored. She nodded, tears in her eyes, but acceptance in her posture. It was the first time I had seen her take responsibility without immediately seeking forgiveness or reconciliation. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. Thomas and I purchased our first home together, a modest but charming apartment in Brooklyn that we could comfortably afford on our combined incomes. We deliberately chose to live within our means rather than stretching for luxury beyond our reach, a lesson I had learned the hard way through my parents' example. My interior design business was rebuilding slowly but steadily with a new focus on creating authentic spaces that reflected clients' true values rather than status or trends. I found myself drawn to projects with meaning and depth, working with clients who appreciated thoughtfulness over showiness. In one of life's strange twists, the scandal surrounding my parents had actually generated interest in my design philosophy. A home design magazine ran a feature on my work titled Authenticity in Design, Creating Spaces with Integrity. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I embraced the opportunity to redefine my career on my own terms. Thomas's career was thriving as well. His principled stand by my side during the family crisis had earned him respect at his firm, and he had recently been promoted to managing director. More importantly, our relationship had deepened through the challenges we had faced together. What could have broken us had instead forged a stronger bond. On our wedding day, as we shared our first dance as husband and wife, Thomas whispered in my ear, "You know what I love most about you? Your resilience. You've taken something that could have destroyed you and instead used it to build something beautiful." Grandpa Warren gave a toast that brought tears to every eye in the room. "To finding family," he said, raising his glass. "Not just the one we're born into, but the one we choose and the one we create. To Camilla and Thomas, who have shown us all what love looks like when it's built on honesty, courage, and integrity. Later that evening, as the small gathering of our closest friends and family celebrated around us, I took a moment to step into the garden alone. The autumn air was crisp stars visible above the city lights in a rare moment of clarity. I thought about the journey of the past year, from the shock of betrayal to this moment of genuine joy. I had lost what I thought was the foundation of my life, only to discover that I could build a stronger one. I had experienced the worst kind of betrayal from those who should have protected me, but also discovered depths of support and love from others that I might never have recognized without the crisis. The path forward wasn't perfect. My relationship with my parents would likely always be complicated. The legal and financial ramifications of their actions would take years to fully resolve. But for the first time since that fateful moment at my engagement party, I felt truly at peace with where I stood. Thomas found me in the garden and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Harrington." I leaned back against his chest, savoring the sound of my new name. "I was just thinking that sometimes losing what you thought you had opens the door to something more genuine. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best beginnings." "Spoken like a woman who knows a thing or two about rebuilding," he said, kissing my temple. We returned to our wedding celebration, surrounded by the family we had chosen and created. As I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by us through the darkest times, I felt a profound gratitude that transcended the pain of the past year. In losing what I thought was my foundation, I had discovered my own strength and built something far more valuable than anything that had been stolen from me, a life of authentic connection grounded in truth. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led you to a better place? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join me for more journeys through life's unexpected twists and turns. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. And remember, sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our most painful challenges.